Welcome to The Sounds of Sand, a podcast inquiring into the beauty and mystery of existence beyond ultimate truths. Welcome back to the Sounds of Sand podcast. This is Michael Riley. Joining me today on the podcast is Vuyi Qubeka, and she is a multidimensional storyteller, artist, and transformative healer. She talks about navigating her illness and surrendering to the profound calling that has led her to her purpose. Through a unique blend of words, images, sounds, and sacred inventions, Vuyi explores the divine feminine and confronts collective traumas, creating powerful installations that weave together photography, video, sound, poetry, and texts, all guided by the ethereal entity of elders, Diop Mau. Now, please welcome Vuyi Qubeka. Okay, I'm here with Vuyi on the Sounds of Sand podcast. Thanks for being here today.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
So as a way to orient listeners and to talk a bit about your lineage and ancestry and path, would you mind telling us a bit about your journey and how you came to the current work that you inhabit today?
So I am in Tanzania, the country currently known as South Africa. And I was born and bred in Johannesburg, in the city. So I'm a thoroughbred city girl. My formative years were in Soweto, the southwestern township. But I soon moved out of that space into greener pastures, as was what many of our parents felt was, the truth, is to migrate out of the township and to move to the suburbs. So we were one of those families. We were at the edge of the transition from apartheid, and we, were there as witnesses when Mandela was scheduled to be released, and we were celebrating. I remember I was still a young child, a toddler at that time. And the country at the time was full of hope. We were moving from this darkness that had, that had kept our ancestors under its boot for generations. And so we were kind of the hope. We were the children that were the ones who were going to bear the fruits of what our ancestors laid down, Moved to the suburbs. That was kind of my first time being aware of the world and the distortions within the world. So I moved from the township, from Soweto, and we lived in a community where we were family. The mamas across the road from you, next door neighbors were your elders. So an older person was your father or mother, and you were surrounded by siblings, and you belonged to more than just your family. You belonged to a community. And then we moved to the suburbs, where there are now tall walls. There are a majority of people that don't look like I do. And that's kind of the first time I felt a sense of awareness of myself and an alienation of sorts. Because I'm now in a space that's not necessarily welcoming. You can't quite define these things as a child, but you can feel them. And that is when I first became aware of myself as a Black person. We were aware of it because of the history of the country, but we were contained within a community where we didn't have to be othered. We didn't have to put a mask on. And then this is now the first time where I'm realizing that I need to assume masks in certain spaces to keep safe. And I'm mentioning that because I think that was the kind of what formed my compassion and my awareness of the world and my awareness of collective trauma, familial trauma, and individual trauma, which is the space in which I work in. So I then was raised in the suburbs and just, growing up, and we moved quite a bit. And these spaces asked for something different. So the more we moved, the more aware I became of how much we had or how little we had. And so I'm starting to understand class systems. And here's the racial system, and then it's the class system. And now we're being exposed to television as young children, and now starting to become aware of other things. Yeah, I'm a twin, so I was always with my twin growing up. We're quite different. And we also grew up with siblings. I have 9 siblings in total. One has transitioned now. So I've always been aware, and these are half siblings, not all of them are my direct siblings. But community has also always been at the core of my experience. So being aware of elders, even if your sibling is 5 years older than you, we were aware of them having a certain level of command because they're elder than us. Yeah, and so I was shaped by a big family. I was shaped by the township. I was shaped by suburbia and the intricacies of that experience. And then moving from a certain kind of culture, maybe I can call it black culture, township culture, then moving to suburban culture and noticing how there's quite a lot of differences in those spaces. In the township, you greet someone you encounter on the road. In the suburbs, you look down and you walk past each other. So I'm witnessing myself becoming dehumanized in some ways as I'm growing up. And I think that's where being exiled from yourself kind of starts. And it feels in retrospect that that's kind of the journey that has led me here, is this kind of being exiled from myself, exiled from love, from community, from family, from presence, from care and compassion. And then I then eventually became sick because of those systems, because now I'm living in a space, in a culture and communities that, we don't look at each other in the eye. We don't necessarily care about each other in the ways that my formative years taught me to care for others. I'm noticing that now these spaces that I live in, these environments where there's no access to television and these programs on TV, MTV and things, I'm now being aware of, as a child, there's this sexualization that occurs, and these patterns of our conditioning that changes us. So I'm just trying to lay out the bits and the patterns that conditioned me out of my true nature, my authentic self. And that kind of then caused this disease within myself of self-rejection, of self-loathing, of confusion. But because I don't have the words to identify what is happening, and my parents as well are foreign to these things that we are being exposed towards, I became, quite a quiet child. Quiet in the sense that I didn't express my emotions. My interior world was my own, including to my direct family. I went to school and I thrived at school, but I wasn't encouraged to do what I was good at school. I needed, which was art and drama and acting and those kinds of things. My twin sister was significantly different to me. So, it made sense for me to go to be directed towards what adults do when they grow up. So that is, for a character like me, maybe marketing or advertising, so I tried to find something that would appease my parents. And I studied media studies and tried to find my way in the system, in the corporate world. And I worked in mostly communications and words, worked as a travel journalist as well. And up until the point where I became depressed, I became sick, I retreated from the world, from people, and I was no longer able to connect with the world as it was, with, the kind of avatars that people take on and the disconnection that we eventually experience as humans when we aren't our authentic selves. So that is when I had quite an awakening. I almost past died after having been sick for a long time with migraine headaches, with what then was later discovered to be depression. And in short, after that, I ended up in a mental health facility. And it was then, when I was in hospital for 2 weeks, that I had made the decision, with the support of, these special people that show up at critical times in our lives, plant medicine, and just synchronicity and the universe conspiring. I then journeyed on a journey to healing myself after having spent a lot of money trying to heal and trying to figure out what was wrong with me, with the headaches, why I was sick, going to neurologists and having head scans. And then I went to the Eastern Cape, which is a rural homeland, to go and live with the Sangoma shaman, to go and negotiate for my life, to call my spirit back. And essentially, I lived the ways of my ancestors, and I healed by the way of the traditional drum and the ways of old to heal. It was a 3-part journey. It was quite a long journey, but yeah.
Beautiful. That's such a journey, because it's you live through history, first of all, with growing up in the end of apartheid and Nelson Mandela, that era. It's and you touched into a lot of topics. I'm not sure where to go next specifically. Maybe we'll start from the end. So, because I'm very, very curious about this connection with shamanism and your journey to the eastern part of the country, and how was that experience, and what was that like?
It was I like that you're starting there, because the first experience I had, there's this book by Frans Fanon where he talks about black skin, white masks. What I realized when I got to the Eastern Cape, I was at the edge of Lesotho, the place called Zolo. And as soon as I got there, I noticed that for the first time since I left Soweto, I was no longer wearing a mask, because I was in a village that was full of people who looked like me. I no longer had to interface myself and the mask and the avatars that I had created. I was now in this void that was just offering me a womb-like space to I didn't even know that I wasn't breathing for all of these years. And so that was a life-changing experience as a city girl, as someone who, you wake up and you can hear cars, depending on where I lived at the time, but you can hear the cars, you can hear the people next door, you can hear traffic, you can hear the hooters from the taxis, minibus taxis, and to now arrive at a place where you can hear the silence and you can see the darkness. So nighttime is nighttime. It's not pierced by, these lights, security lights, and you can see the stars because pollution is not thick on the air. And I was also barefoot and sleeping on the floor, and I had a specific uniform that I had to wear, which in some ways was embarrassing because it's just some of the things that I had to wear, embarrassing to my old self. But I soon got comfortable in who I had to be then, for me to be able to twasa. Twasa means to blossom. And so, the invitation was for me to just and blossom. And being barefoot, and then, sometimes we go out into the city to go get things and people are staring. it was really you're being asked to face your ego, because so what that I'm barefoot, so what that other people are staring at me, and really needing to look within myself and understand what it is I'm being called to do, how huge this thing is of having to call your spirit back, right? Of having to say, yo, I tried everything to get better. I don't know what is wrong with me, but I am willing to surrender to this scariness, right? So we're walking in mountains in the darkness, barefoot, and I'm in a completely different kind of reality. But the trusting in itself, the surrender is an initiation. Everything is an initiation. Cooking by the fire, sleeping on the floor, trance dancing in the mornings to connect with the drum, so that you're tapping into a different space of different aspects of who you are, but also to the different aspects of life, of spirit that we can't always touch if we're distracted, if we're sick. So it was life changing. I can go on about that, but even just it was a return to my body as well. So I'm having to kneel when I speak to people, whether it's a child or an adult. But because I am in this place as a Twasa, I need to learn how to kneel with my heart. So I'm literally kneeling when I speak to people. When I enter the sacred shrine, I kneel before I come in. So I'm also breaking the body to some degree, walking barefoot, having to make a fire at 5 a.m. in the morning in June. And it's cold outside. It's -2 degrees sometimes. And so, my fingers, my hands are frozen. My feet are frozen. And then when I make the fire to boil water so I can purge and prepare the medicine, my hands and my feet are then having to thaw again. And so it's this kind of, matter and mind meeting, and you're learning the science of your own body right in front of your eyes, right inside of your body. So yeah, I'll stop there. It was a very profound experience.
And this is the content. So that you sent me the essay, My Feet Ached for Liberation. This is sort of that journey, reconnection, let's say. So you were basically on a journey of reconnection with a deeper form of ancestry that you felt cut off from, as you said, wearing white masks in the city of Johannesburg and in the suburbs.
I mean, my ancestors, but also very much my own self. I realized that, and self, not in the self, not in the, but I mean, so many of us are what's this word? We're not inside our bodies. And I realized that I hadn't been present emotionally, mentally. I was always, this anxiety. I was a very anxious person, overthinking, the masks, the white masks. The way that we lived, we wear rubber shoes. We don't spend time outside in nature. So I needed to come back into my body. I needed to heal my emotional, spiritual, mental, physical bodies to even begin to contact the messages that my ancestors had. And for a long time, I didn't understand that was, I struggled a bit to understand my relationship with my ancestors, with the Great Spirit, because I wasn't online.
It was also my reunion with God. I came to that realization while there that I'd lost my connection to the divine, to the Most High, which was part of why I'd been in so much pain.
Before we pressed record, you did this beautiful ceremony with the singing bowl. It reminds me of Thich Nhat Hanh, the Zen Buddhist monk. He has a quote about when we ring the bell, when we ring a meditation bell, it's an invitation for the cells in our body and for the deepness of our body to relax completely. And we do it not just for ourselves, but for our ancestors who are alive in our bodies, because they might not have had that chance to relax and to let go and let the vibration of the bell
That's
soothe
exactly
the body.
it. And it's so profound. And it goes even down to the nervous system. The more you hear, the more you realize that, the sigh of relief is echoing back, generations in so many facets of this life experience. And that's what it is. And I think that's why then you have to consume and spend time with the drum, because it's calling on our ancestors, those realms, the harmonics of the earth to co-create, to conspire with you in this healing and this generation.
Yeah, it all started with the Big Bang, the current creation myth of that first beat. And, all throughout culture, that the drum is that pulse of life has been so central to our way of life. And I think it's an interesting, when you're talking about growing up in Johannesburg, because I see reflections of that, of course, in the US where I'm from, where the African diaspora has I think consciously, but also subconsciously, placed so many people from Africa in the cities, so where they're really cut off from nature. And we have this phrase in cities, and especially on the East Coast, of food deserts. I don't know have you ever heard of this phrase? Yeah, it's where so there's no source of fresh food. Everything is packaged in plastic. Lots of preservatives. And I've worked in schools in the inner city in Philadelphia, and I see the kids, they process potato chips and sugar juice every day. That's their nutrition for breakfast, and it's just like, it's so divorced from the old ways of life and through the ways of knowing that I think you hopefully experienced in this journey in the east of your country, as you're talking about.
Yeah, but what was quite heartbreaking about that experience is that has entered the rural parts of our countries as well. So, the townships are much like the ghettos in the United States, where there is a bottle store on every block, and the most affordable foods are the ones that aren't healthy for you. The same kind of model has been placed in the rural parts of the country, and of course, because there's still space and the landscape and the air and the fresh air, it's not as bad. But when you go to the towns and you go to the shops, there's this broken glasses everywhere. There is a problem with alcoholism there as well. So the lifestyles that are permeating us through the televisions are, it's everywhere. But of course, in access to nature, you have choice. Let's put it.
A phrase that you use that I'd like to hear more about is the authentic self that you discovered in this journey. If you're comfortable sharing more about that.
And when you say your question, I just want to, like, what I mean by the authentic self, or okay. Yeah. So, I mentioned I'm a twin. I've already in our conversations, I'm African. I'm in South Africa, so I'm South African. Then I mentioned that I'm a Black woman. I'm a twin. I'm all of these things. And I'm a daughter. and even how that plays out within the family, right? We assume a character within the family space. There's, the concept of self-fulfilling prophecy. There are ways in which individuals in our lives see us, and we kind of play into that. And along my journey, I then had to strip away some of those things, as hard as it might be. There are expectations that society places on us, and in some ways that we place on ourselves, about how you're supposed to behave, who you're supposed to be. And along the journey, where I was barefoot and initially embarrassed of the current path I was on, I realized that none of those things I carried all those time, for all those years, mattered in this moment. I didn't need to carry them. And it was frightening, because then I am not anything or anyone. And that's frightening for us. That was frightening for me. I realized that because of some of the traumas I experienced in my life, because of the continuum, this continuous theme of being exiled from self. And you then, in each space you find yourself in, you create a character around yourself to survive and to accommodate the space you're in now. Okay, how do I survive this? Like a lot of us read our parents, and we know that if I behave like this, I might upset my mother. And so we start to behave in ways that will make her happy. We do that in so many spaces. And I realized that I'm now in this space, like I say, this womb that's inviting me to blossom and to heal. It was a process. I'm still on it. But I realized that I needed to reconnect with my authentic self. The self that I contacted when I was Minkita, Cancer, which is when I was trance dancing. That was nothing, but it was everything. And it was immense, and it was ancient, but it was also now. And that is when I realized that even some of so obviously I was born in this country that had this really heavy history, and I had these heavy perceptions as well about my race, white people, Afrikaans people, and I needed to face my judgments. But it was amazing because I'm doing it apart from the masks. I'm doing it within a place that I feel safe within. So yeah, for the authentic self is the place that I discovered was beyond the anxieties that I had about who I was, who I wasn't, what I had, what I didn't have. And it was a place that didn't need labels. And I realized that the anxiety came from these labels that I thought that I had to carry. Authenticity also I realized was a sort of righteousness, in the sense, not religiosity, but a righteousness that said, you're allowed to use your voice, you're allowed to be you, you're allowed to remember. There's a righteousness in nature. When you look at how the sun makes love, photosynthesizes the plants, or how the bees and the flowers interact. There is a holiness and a purity in that, and that is what I was beginning to understand about myself. Like there was nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with the color of my skin. There's nothing wrong if right now I don't have a penny to my name, because I'm in this process that is so important, so significant. That's what I mean by authentic self, by a fundamental nature, a place that's beyond all of those things.
You've mentioned individual and collective trauma, and your people in South Africa have been through a tremendous ordeal through colonialism and apartheid. And as someone who lived through that era, the global community now we're seeing taking a leading role in condemning what's happening in Gaza and declaring what Israel is doing as a genocide. So I'm just curious, how was that news received in your communities there in South Africa?
It was quite an emotional day when we received the news from the ICJ and the judgment and the recommendations. It feels significant. It's bone level deep for us. I was talking to my family, some of my family and friends about it, and it felt like there was some sort of retribution for our ancestors as well, and they were very much behind that because we know about it so well. And in a world where so many atrocities consistently over time have been kind of ignored and silenced, and it's a massive turning point in history, even if it's just conscientizing us to the ways in which the world really works, and how all of that trickles down into the most mundane parts of our lives that we don't even think about. In some ways, Gaza, Palestine, Israel is freeing us because enough is enough. And I just have to think, you've mentioned Sudan, I just have to think of the Congo. And in our context, I think America can also relate. Many cities, big cities can relate. But in South Africa, we have a lot of foreign nationals from all over the continent because of what has been created. And to sit with someone who has been exiled from home, you speak to someone from the DRC who, the pain is etched on their faces because of what has happened, because of the resources in this country, but we're still called the poorest country, the poorest continent in the world. But, empires in Europe have been built on the backs of what the Great Spirit, what God put in our land is, it's a lot. And so when you look at what is happening with the wars, and the atrocities, the big ones and the smaller ones, I think it's encouraging in the ways, in the sense that you can tell that there's a change happening. You can tell that we're waking up. You can tell that a lot more of us are willing to say, okay, let me look at what this person might, what message they might have. Whereas before, you thought that if I have certain beliefs and ideologies, and that's it. But now I think there's even more curiosity about what someone else thinks or what others believe, because we know that we don't know. The collective trauma war, some people might even call, what we all experienced in 2020. It was like the first time that we all, as a globe, collectively experienced something that, affected us deeply. And yes, I don't know, the pandemic. And I think that was kind of, the turning point that has led to where we are now. And that's what I mean when I say, this moment is freeing us, is because even that, the context of, the pandemic and the details of all of that are pointing towards the same issue, are pointing towards the same tyranny. On
the off chance that someone in Gaza might be listening to this recording at some point, do you have any advice, or as someone who's lived through that collective trauma of apartheid and that's oppression from a governmental level on you because of your race and your class, do you have any advice for them listening to that now on how to get through that?
it's a hard one to look at and to talk about, because I know as a South African, and looking at how my own country is deteriorating and how we are still living, we're still kind of in the aftermath of the nightmare of what war does, what colonization can do. And I didn't live through apartheid in the ways that my parents did, my grandparents did, my great-grandparents did, by grace. So I can't even imagine what it must be like to live there at this time. But I know for sure that in my darkest times, I knew that I was held by a spirit bigger than myself. Whether you call the great spirit Allah, or you call the spirit God, or the Most High, or Jah, you are held. You are held, and many things might not make sense right now, but you remain held. And as a South African, I want to tell you that you are loved, that we see you, that we hear you, that we pray for you, that we sing for you, that we bless you, that we welcome you, that we accept you, that we lift you up, and that we carry you in our spirits and carry you in our hearts. We bless the wombs of your grandmothers, the wombs of the mothers who have lost children. We bless your fathers who are trying to protect their families and their children, and they're failing, not because they can't, but because they're up against madness, such darkness. Knowing that is what a duty of a father is, I think that's why what I would say is that you have friends, you have family that are fighting for you. Our lawyers went and our country stood behind them saying, this stops now. So know that, hold on to that you have family down south, that loves you, and there's no greater protection than love.
Freedom in your lifetime might feel like an impossible task. You may not be able to imagine that retribution and freedom and peace will come. We could never have imagined the promised land. We could have never imagined that we would one day be free as South Africans. Our grandmothers never ceased praying, don't cease praying or hoping. Freedom will come, promised land will come. A change is on its way.
I wanted to ask too about, I watched this beautiful TED Talk you did about not dying with our music inside of us. That was from a few years ago, like 5 years ago or so.
It's 5.
Yeah. Is that still a phrase that resonates with you? I return to that phrase all the time. Don't die with your music still inside of you.
Yeah, I refer to myself as a SoulSongSage, a sage that creates a container for people to remember what songs are with them, what songs they carry, because that's what we've come here to do. We were talking about the dolphins earlier on, and the lion. There's the bee, busy being. And we are the only ones that aren't in tune with the song that we're meant to sing, which is why we're out of disharmony, not harmonizing with each other. So it still resonates, and I am still an advocate for that, and that is largely the work that I do. Is to facilitate that remembrance, or in that harmony choir. And yeah, it was interesting because that talk within itself it happened very suddenly within a few days, and it forced my song back out of me after I had struggled for a long time to express myself, to be my true self, because of some of the traumas I had had and things that had happened over the years, like the exile, being exiled for myself, like I mentioned. I was unable to express myself. I would stutter sometimes, and when I spoke, I would speak and then kind of speak into my mouth because I didn't think anyone wanted to hear me. But when this happened, it happened so suddenly. It was not long after I was on this journey that I'd graduated out of initiation. And yeah, I graduated by this moment that allowed me to kind of clear my throat and use my voice. And you hear it in the beginning of that talk that I'm kind of still, battling between the old self and this, my spirit, my song, my soul. And yeah, that's it. And I like that because it exemplifies that we can kind of call our spirits back and bring our voices back home.
And now let's listen to an excerpt from that TED Talk from 2018.
It is when you are called to take the inward journey into yourself, into those quiet, secret places where we might begin to love ourselves and see ourselves and appreciate ourselves and value ourselves and stand tall in who we are. We all have the calling. I've always known about my intuitive gifts all of my life, but I didn't know what to do with them. I didn't know that I had to do anything with them, and I had no clue that not doing anything with them would make me sick. In today's society, African spirituality and traditional medicine has become taboo. It's been stigmatized and demonized, and we've put ourselves away, part of ourselves, part of the gifts that give us life. It took me as long as it did to finally surrender to my call, because no one around me, myself, my parents, my family, and my community could recognize what was happening to me. I suffered, so they suffered, and no one could help. I spent 2 weeks in a mental health facility where I met beautiful, sensitive, and gifted souls who struggle to fit in the boxes and the structures and the pressures that society imposes on us. It was in hospital that I finally surrendered to what I knew I had to do. I was discharged and I was led to healers and began intensive plant work. That gave me the courage, the clarity, and the confidence to resign from my job, to sell my car, to sell my clothes, to sell my possessions, and to relinquish any ideas and assumptions that I had about who I had been till that point. Because who we are is so defined by what's outside of us, by our family structures, by society, and by what we see in mainstream media. But how do we really know what's inside until we get there? I left for the Eastern Cape to be initiated as a traditional healer. I left to go and twasa. And twasa means to blossom in isiXhosa. Silence and blossoming go hand in hand. I lived with my teacher. and lived the ways of my ancestors as part of the medicine. My journey was threefold, and I had multiple teachers. It was a 1.5 years of initiation, and I healed at the grace of plant medicine, at the beat of the drum, and traditional trance dancing. Slowly, my songs began to come back to me. I had a union with my own divinity and witnessed what I was capable of becoming. That quiet place inside. That's where all the songs come from. That's where all the poetry comes from. That's where all the sound comes from. That's where all the painting comes from. That's where the trust of yourself comes from, the imagination and the creativity. Sometimes something has to die first before something else can be born. And I've learned, and I continue to learn, that there's nothing more liberating, nothing more freeing, and nothing more empowering than surrendering to the calls of your own heart. We've come for ourselves. We deserve ourselves. When we don't answer the messages and the intuitions that the universe and all that is, the invisible, gives us, we get sick. That is why I got sick. Disease is dis-ease in the body. Are we meant to feel like we're suffocating? Are we meant to feel lost and confused and a sense of self-loathing? Are we meant to reject ourselves like we do? Are we meant to be in so much despair and so much pain? I don't think so. I believe that we're meant to be ourselves. I believe that we're meant to be free. I believe that we're meant to dance our dance and sing our song. I believe that we're meant to choose ourselves. When you have the courage to surrender to the calls of your own heart, and you have the audacity to dance your dance and listen to the intuitions that the universe gives us periodically, your heart, your soul, and the universe rise up to support and to hold you and to manifest anything that you desire. Surrendering takes you by the hand and leads you to your songs. Every moment is the perfect moment for you to be who you are. Don't die with your song still inside you. Don't die with your song still inside you. My body is the memory that moves inside my flesh. My emotions and antithesis, touching timelessness. The body moves and bends itself, reaching for prophetic homes in service of the healing, the incumbent sacrifice. A flame lynching through distortions, hearts oiled with crude. A serpent reaches out inside the sweetness at my center. It tosses It moans. I fall into her scales. Don't die with your song still inside you. Kamako. Ashe, namaste, inshallah. Vayadanki.
Yeah, there's something very rich about that. The idea of this ancient song that's inside of us, finding the voice, and the sort of the Catholic Saint Francis of Assisi has this prayer: make me an instrument of your peace. And that seems resonant somehow with what you're speaking about. To allow that song to come through you, to realize maybe the song's not even in us, but it's just kind of out there, and it kind of comes through us, and it's just we become that instrument of the song that needs to be
and
sung.
we are the song. We are, because we're talking about the drum. First drum that we hear is the beating of a mother's heart. Whilst we're in the womb, boom, that's who we are. And then the first time we come up, and when we hear that, the harmony of the earth, we cry, we sing. That is our first inclination, is to sing. And then somehow, somewhere, we stop singing. But there is power in voice. There's power in song. There's power in the frequency that reverberates through our body, which is water, right? Through our ocean, is there to heal us, to remind us, and to transform us. So the song, so song as an analogy for your purpose or your calling, but the song, the actual voice of your voice, is also medicine. It's also the song that needs to be unshackled.
Yeah. Have you do you know Jonathan Goldman? He's like he created and he has this book, The Humming Effect.
I haven't read the book.
Have you heard?
Tell me.
Yeah, it's basically this idea that our own voices are our medicine. There's a resonance in the way our skulls are constructed, and the length of our throat, and the size of our chest, that there's a frequency that we can find with our humming. So it might be a low pitch or a more higher pitch. And it's all connected to, nada yoga, the idea of sound as a healing force in yoga. That's from India. Just this idea that we can soothe ourselves through humming, through finding that inner vibration that resonates our body. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, even our sexual organs, well, a woman specifically, all of like a baby's, when a baby's still a fetus, the sexual organs in the throat look very similar. And in some cultures, when a woman is in labor and she's kind of struggling, she is asked to sing because of the connection between, I would say the root chakra. So it's very integral. And even you mentioned soothing just now. The most cultures have lullabies because songs soothe us. So that's the first kind of language of our souls and our spirits and our hearts recognize and understand.
Number one, number two. Number one, number two.
We're listening to Ancient Dreams, the AxisZulu Natural mix by Vuyi Qubeka. So, any kind of projects coming up, or courses or books, anything you'd like to talk about that's coming up for you?
So, in terms of my art, that is one thing that I've kind of been stubborn about over the last couple of years, because whilst I was in initiation school, and a specific part of my journey, the last 7 months of my journey, were quite hard. It was quite a traumatizing space that I was in. I was in 3 different spaces, and the last space I speak about initially, specifically, was an initiation school. And through that pain, I discovered that I am a painter, that I'm an artist. I discovered my art
Beautiful.
Through visions, but there's a specific pigment, there's a specific mud, ochre mud, double boom, mbola, that you see some
ochre, you said?
Yes, that you see some tribes put on their hair or on their skin, the red kind of pigment. I began to paint, and I began to communicate with the earth through the pigment. So I would say trying to heal and hear the land in which I am at the time through painting with the soil, with the with her sand, or dirt, as Americans say. And so, but because of the way that we've been conditioned, I was kind of focused on, no, I can't focus on that now. I need to there's the emphasis on money. I need to make money. I need to survive, right? So that was kind of what I was focusing on, although I did have moments where I did performance art, and we participated in some exhibitions, but I didn't take my art as seriously as I now understand is how serious I now understand it to be. Creation, the energy of creation, and I think for all humans, whatever our art is, and I like the art, art is present in the word heart, but whatever it is, whether it's gardening or whether it's some people are more left-brained, or however it is we create, but the energy of creation is supposed to circulate through us, which is why our imaginations are our first friends as children in this world. And so the point at which I'm at now is, trying to balance the work that I do more with my art. But also, I mentioned something to you about becoming dust, becoming like the dust. And this is kind of the season that I'm in now. And I think a lot of humans are being invited to occupy. We kind of touched on it during the pandemic because we were in lockdown, we were kind of forced to. But I think a lot of us moved out of that space prematurely. But if we are saying that this old paradigm is falling apart, and we're calling in a new dawn, then we're having to put down some of the ideologies and the tools and the ways in which we've done things. And I found that for myself, the last year specifically was a struggle. And it was what I noticed and realized in some of the guidance that came through was that I'm insisting on doing things in the old way, but we're being invited to do things in a new way because these systems won't survive in the new.
Right.
And so I'm in a space where I'm also really trying to listen, to live outside of the labels. Yes, I am a healer or a speaker or a storyteller and these things, but what does that really mean? What am I being really called towards in this next chapter that humanity is stepping inside of? And how can I be true to it without dragging things that are meant to be there along with me? Part of that, because we're moving from this yang energy, from this masculine space, is my focus this year is more on, I work within the realm of sexual trauma mostly. But I this year is more focused on men, so individuals who have more testosterone. I think a lot of women have been in the thick of healing over the last couple of years, and we're kind of being called to hold space now for the masculine collective. And this is going to be a particularly demanding year for men, in terms of the healing needed, the transformation, the remembering, all of those things. So I have some retreats for men out in the desert that I am facilitating and holding space with, camping and kind of just communing with nature, and that is part of it. And then like the art.
Where will those be? The men's retreats?
In the Karoo. I don't know if you know where the Karoo is, but it's a region in the country that's kind of desert-like.
Okay.
Yeah. And then some will be in Johannesburg in collaboration with a group that specifically works on supporting men to heal. And the reason why, so I did this a few years ago, but I got into some trouble with some healers, and some female healers felt that I was kind of betraying them for doing healing circles for men. And one of the ladies that I had a conversation with, I asked her, she's a mother, and she's a mother to boys. And it was during the time where the very toxic phrase, men are trash, was trending. And I asked her, but like, how are we creating, what kind of world are we creating for our boys if we're allowing this kind of narrative to just be normalized, and if we're not creating spaces for which, you know, men can heal. And I was still young in my work, so I was kind of bullied out of that. I let myself be bullied out of that. So, but what I now understand very clearly is, like with anyone who comes into this world, we have to move through a womb to come into this space. And the healer inside the healer inside the sangoma, inside the shaman, is a woman. And for true transformation to happen, men can help themselves only so far, but the presence of the womb brings in something completely different. And this is the transition we're inside of, right? This is where we're moving up towards when we talk about feminine energy or divine feminine, or the energy of the grandmothers, is to anchor in that energy and to share it with those that need it, that are willing and open to. Yeah. So that is my focus this year, is becoming dust, the silence, to listen, but to learn how to listen again, to hold space for the sacred masculine, and to strengthen that by focusing on the art, which is my creative side, right? So this is the right brain, this is the feminine. So that is, and I'm saying this because I think all of us need to remember how to hold those sides of us in ways that support us.
Beautiful. Well, as a man, I love that framing of the sacred masculine.
Yeah.
Because as you said, the phrase "men are trash," or whether it's toxic masculinity, and I'm a bit older, so I feel like I'm able to kind of see that in context. But I do worry about like young boys who are growing up with that message of toxic masculinity, that their actual essence is toxic.
Yeah.
It seems harmful.
Yeah.
In many,
It's very harmful, and I think you do see the product of that in the world, and how men have been disarmed. There's a specific role that men play within homes, within communities, within society, that kind of keep certain things out. But if men believe themselves to be toxic, then there's a fear, or there's anxiety, there's other things that develop and kind of force them out of their nature. And which is why some of the things that have happened in the world have been allowed to, because masculinity, when we think about a Jedi master who knows how to be zen and silent, but knows how to wield his sword, that is a man. A man is a protector, man is a lion, and there's nothing toxic about that. There are toxic human beings, there are toxic women, and there are toxic men.
Sure.
And we have to, it's important that we support men and ourselves and each other and women to re-educate us back into the roles that we play, the importance of us being like the authenticity, right? Feminine woman being in their natural essence and not emulating men, and vice versa, because softness has left a lot of homes, has left a lot of society, because we're overcompensating and not in our natural scent. I put it that way, as a woman. And so it's very detrimental. And one thing I know for sure, studies have even showed that, is that the presence of a man in a home and in society is so important. Children who don't have a man in the house are more likely to be imprisoned, to be broke or poor, to be a drug addict. There's so many things, but we're not aware of this. We don't understand each other's value, and so that's kind of the space that I'm occupying this year.
Thank you so much. That was a lovely way to close. So thank you for being on the podcast and for spending time with us today.
Thank you for spending time with me, and much love and peace to all of you listeners, and to you and your family.
And now to close us out is another sonic piece from Vuyi Qubeka called Moon Chant. Thank you for listening today.